Imagine you're standing in the middle of, like, a really bustling cityscape.
Right. Tons of traffic, people everywhere.
Exactly. And you look down, and there's a subway grate right at your feet. You can feel the slight vibration. You hear that low rumble of a train arriving.
Oh, yeah. And you feel that rush of warm air pushing up from the tunnels.
Yeah, that exact feeling. Now, usually when we think about a public transit agency, our imagination just kind of stops right there at the grate.
It really does.
Their entire job, their whole mandate, is basically to take you down into those dark tunnels, put you on a metallic tube, and just move you from point A to point B. I mean, it is a strictly horizontal, strictly underground operation.
Well, and for over a century, that utilitarian relationship has pretty much defined urban infrastructure across the globe.
Right.
You go underground to move, and you come above ground to live. The transit authority handles the commute, and while the real estate developers handle the destination.
Yeah, they're two totally separate worlds.
Exactly. The two domains rarely cross paths in any meaningful, structural way.
But, and this is where it gets crazy, what if you looked up? What if that same transit agency decided that simply moving people underground wasn't enough anymore?
It's a huge shift.
What if they decided to build a massive 400-unit skyscraper right on top of that very subway grate?
Which is wild to think about.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the urban paradox we are unpacking in today's deep dive into the source material. We've got a fascinating stack of articles today from wikiresidence.ca and infodrone.ca, and we're looking at what happens when a city's public transit agency decides to step out of the tunnels and become a massive real estate developer in the sky.
Right, and specifically the Société de Transport de Montreal, or the STM, is the agency attempting this historic shift. When you read through the source material, it becomes really clear that we aren't just talking about pouring a little extra concrete here or, laying down a few new tracks.
Not at all.
No, we are looking at a fundamental reimagining of how a 21st century city funds itself. We're looking at how a city houses its people and, frankly, how it survives an era defined by massive transit operating deficits and severe housing crises.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because a public transit agency doesn't just wake up on a Tuesday morning and decide to start building luxury condos and affordable housing complexes.
No, they definitely don't.
Right. I mean, they're a government-adjacent bureaucracy. They're designed to run trains and buses. So to pull off a real estate empire, they need a highly specialized business machine.
Yes.
How are they physically and legally restructuring themselves to actually make this happen?
Well, to orchestrate this metamorphosis, the STM had to create a dedicated engine. They established a specific real estate structure called Mobilis Immobilier.
Mobilis Immobilier.
Exactly. And this entity operates under the umbrella of their commercial subsidiary, Transgesco. The sources highlight this structure specifically to show that this isn't just some vague conceptual white paper. Mobilis Immobilier is a highly organized, legally distinct business machine. And it's designed to do one primary thing, leverage a concept called air rights.
Air rights. I mean, that sounds almost like science fiction to me.
It does, yeah.
But it literally means they are monetizing the empty space, like the literal air, directly above their station entrances.
That's exactly it, because in dense urban environments, land is the ultimate scarce resource.
Obviously.
But the STM already owns the highly valuable land where their station entrances currently sit. I mean, historically, a station entrance in Montreal was just a single-story brick building or maybe just a concrete awning over a set of stairs leading underground.
Right, just a functional box.
Exactly. The air above it was completely empty. But now, through Mobilis Immobilier, they are capturing the financial value of that vertical space. They've already surveyed their network and identified 13 priority sites targeted for immediate transformation.
13 sites.
13.
Right out of the gate. That is a massive footprint for an entity that has literally never built a housing tower before.
Oh, the scale of what they intend to put into that empty airspace is staggering. We are talking about the creation of 4,000 housing units across the network.
Wow, 4,000.
Yeah. And to give you a tangible sense of the ambition here, the sources highlight a flagship project at the future Cesira-Parasoto station.
That's on the blue line, right?
Yes, on the blue line. That single project alone is slated to feature 400 residential units.
Hearing those numbers immediately reminds me of a really famous business realization regarding fast food.
Oh, like the McDonald's thing.
Yes, exactly. For years, the general public thought McDonald's was simply in the business of selling hamburgers.
Right.
But then you look closely at their financial model and you realize They are actually one of the largest and most ruthless real estate companies in the world.
They really are.
They just happen to sell burgers to fund the acquisition of prime corner lots. It sounds to me like the STM is becoming a real estate developer that just happens to run trains.
The financial engineering detailed in the sources makes that analogy incredibly apt. I mean, the STM isn't building these towers for aesthetic appeal,
Yeah.
and they certainly aren't doing it just to win architectural awards. They're doing this to fundamentally alter their balance sheet. What's fascinating here is that the source material estimates this air rights strategy will create $400 million in new real estate value.
$400 million created literally out of thin air.
Out of thin air. And the true mechanism of survival here isn't just that lump sum value, it's the ongoing cash flow.
Okay, how so?
That $400 million in created value is projected to generate between $15 million and $20 million in annual recurring revenue for the STM.
Ooh.
Yeah, that is unrestricted recurring revenue that can be pumped directly back into funding transit operations. It creates a completely self-sustaining financial loop. The property built above the trains directly funds the movement of the trains below.
That's brilliant on paper. But hold on, I need to push back on this vision a little bit.
Sure.
Because the logistics just seem overwhelmingly complex to me. You cannot just build a 400-unit skyscraper on top of an old crumbling subway vent.
No, you definitely can't.
Right. And the foundation of any real estate pitch, whether it's a small coffee shop or a massive condo tower, is location and foot traffic.
Always.
A private developer isn't going to partner with the STM to build these vertical neighborhoods unless there's an absolute guarantee of people flowing through those doors.
Absolutely true.
And maintaining a transit system that moves that many people requires massive, constant upkeep. So how is the STM supporting all this new weight, like both physically in terms of engineering and financially?
Well, the foundation of this entire real estate vision relies entirely on ridership and modernized infrastructure. If we look at the foot traffic first, ridership is the ultimate lever for value here.
Right.
The relevance and the profitability of these real estate projects rests on a very solid recovery in ridership post-pandemic. In 2024, the STM recorded 314.6 million trips.
Let's just pause on that number for a second. 314.6 million.
It's a lot of people.
That is a staggering amount of human movement.
It really is. It represents a 9% increase over the previous year. And if you break that annual number down, you are looking at more than 1.1 million trips per weekday.
Wow.
So imagine you're a commercial retailer looking to open a new location, or maybe a residential developer trying to sell apartments.
Okay.
If you build your storefront or your apartment lobby directly into a metro station, you have a guaranteed captive audience of over 1 million people flowing past your doors or right under your building every single weekday.
That's impossible to ignore.
It is. This critical mass of passengers guarantees an unparalleled level of visibility and accessibility that traditional real estate simply cannot offer.
Okay, so the foot traffic is undeniable. The demand and the captive audience are definitely there. But what about the physical infrastructure? Because when I was reading through the source material, the numbers regarding their upcoming budget are, frankly, mind-blowing.
Oh, the capital investments are historic in scale. The STM's 2025 to 2034 Capital Works program forecasts record spending of $25.8 billion over the next decade.
$25.8 billion.
Yeah.
Where exactly is a transit agency funneling that much money? Because obviously they aren't just spending $25 billion on, like, marble countertops for a condo lobby.
No, of course not. The budget breakdown reveals just how deeply intertwined the transit mission and the real estate mission have become.
Okay.
There are two massive envelopes supporting this. First, you have $7.2 billion specifically earmarked for the Blue Line extension. This extension is adding 5 completely new stations to the network. That's entirely new territory, which creates fresh opportunities for both transit routing and vertical real estate development.
Right, and that $7.2 billion includes building out that Cesira-Parisoto station we mentioned earlier, right? The one that's going to host the 400-unit flagship project.
Exactly. And then the second major envelope is the figure that usually catches people off guard.
Which is?
Out of that total budget, $10.7 billion is dedicated to asset maintenance.
Wow.
Yeah, and a massive portion of that is for modernizing existing legacy stations so they can physically and structurally accommodate these new massive residential towers on top of them.
See, this is where I have to pause and put on my commuter hat for a second.
Go for it.
$10.7 billion for asset maintenance and modernizing. As a daily rider, if I'm standing on a crowded platform, My train is delayed by 10 minutes, the escalator's broken, and the station roof is actively leaking onto the tracks.
Right, which happens.
It does. I might look at that budget and think, wait a minute, is the STM losing its focus?
That's a fair question.
Are they risking their core mandate, which is simply getting the trains to run safely and on time, by spending billions of dollars to structurally reinforce old stations just so they can play real estate developer in the sky? Like, is this a dangerous loss of focus, or is this a necessary growing pain?
Well, that skepticism is entirely natural for a commuter.
Yeah.
But the deeper analysis of the Capital Works program shows that these aren't competing priorities. They are inextricably linked.
Hope so.
You cannot have the high-value, revenue-generating real estate without a flawless, modernized transit foundation beneath it. If we connect this to the bigger picture, let me give you a very specific example from the source material that illustrates the necessity of this spending.
Please do.
Within that massive budget, there is $1 billion specifically earmarked for universal accessibility.
And by universal accessibility, we're primarily talking about installing elevators, right?
Elevators, ramps, and seamless barrier-free entry points. Now, traditionally, adding an elevator to a 60-year-old underground subway station is viewed simply as a transit upgrade for mobility-impaired riders.
Right.
It's undeniably the right thing to do, but it's viewed purely as a sunken transit expense. It costs money, but it doesn't generate revenue.
Right. It's just a mechanical tool that helps people get down to the train safely.
Exactly. But the sources explicitly reframe this. They state that this $1 billion for universal accessibility is an essential component for the social diversity of future real estate projects.
Oh, that's an interesting way to phrase it.
Right. Think about the literal physics and the sociology of a vertical neighborhood. If you are building affordable housing, social housing, and bustling commercial hubs directly above a transit station, every single resident needs to move seamlessly.
Yeah, of course.
Whether they're pushing a stroller, carrying heavy groceries, or using a wheelchair, they need to travel from their 30th floor apartment down through the station concourse and onto the train without hitting a single barrier.
Wow. I hadn't thought about it like that.
The elevators aren't just a transit upgrade anymore. They are the essential baseline requirement to ensure that these real estate projects above are actually viable, accessible, and livable spaces for a diverse population.
That completely flips the perspective on the budget.
It really does.
They aren't sacrificing transit money to fund real estate vanity projects. They are actively upgrading the transit network because the real estate demands a modernized foundation.
Exactly.
And in turn, the real estate will eventually generate the revenue to pay for the transit network's upkeep. It's basically a closed-loop ecosystem.
Yes, the developing of those air rights allows the STM to monetize the space, but the model only functions if the station below is a modernized, universally accessible hub. You simply can't put a 21st century skyscraper on top of a mid-20th century ruin.
Okay, so we have a clear view of the blueprint. We know they built this dedicated arm, Mobilis Immobilier. We understand the mechanism of monetizing air rights to create a $400 million value engine.
Right.
And we've dug into the physical foundation. The 314 million annual riders and the massive $25.8 billion infrastructure commitment required to literally hold these buildings up. But the conversation has to shift to the ultimate so what?
Okay.
If you are listening to this right now, how does this actually change the city you live in? Like, how does this benefit you beyond just fixing a transit agency's internal balance sheets?
Well, the ultimate benefit to the listener and the city comes down to a dual impact.
Okay.
It's a direct economic return and a massive lifestyle shift. Let's look at the immediate economics first, because the mechanism the STM uses to generate this recurring revenue is genuinely fascinating. They utilize something called emphyteutic leases.
Emphyteutic leases. I mean, that sounds like a piece of medieval property law.
It kind of is.
Let me take a swing at understanding the mechanism here, because earlier we talked about how a transit agency isn't really equipped to be a landlord. It sounds to me like planting a massive digital orchard. Like, if I own the dirt at the station entrance, but I don't want the immense financial risk of buying the seeds, planting the trees, and hiring the farmers, I lease the dirt to a professional farmer. They take all the risk of building the orchard, and in return, I just take a guaranteed cut of the apple sales for the next century. Am I close?
That orchard analogy captures the mechanism perfectly, particularly regarding the transfer of risk.
Oh, okay.
An emphyteutic lease is a very long-term lease. It often stretches to 99 years.
Wow, 99 years.
Yeah. And what it means in this urban context is that the STM does not sell the land or those precious air rights outright. They maintain long-term public ownership.
Got it.
Instead, they lease that vertical space to private developers. Those private developers take on the immense financial risk of securing loans, pouring concrete, and building the towers.
Which is huge.
Exactly. And in return, the STM gets decades of guaranteed recurring income to offset their operating deficit without having to manage the day-to-day nightmares of being a traditional landlord, like fixing leaky faucets or dealing with tenant disputes.
So the city gets the financial upside, they keep ownership of the land, but they offload the operational risk to the private sector.
Precisely.
That is incredibly clever.
It is. And the second part of the economic impact is the broader societal return on investment. The sources highlight a staggering statistic regarding public infrastructure spending.
Let's hear it.
It's estimated that every single dollar invested in public transit generates 3 times more economic fallout than traditional road investments.
A 3-to-1 multiplier.
Yep.
So for every dollar a city spends laying asphalt for cars, if they put that exact same dollar into the metro system and these new multi-use hubs, it generates $3 of widespread economic activity for the surrounding community.
Exactly. The math heavily favors transit. And that economic reality leads us to the broader societal impact, which is driven by a planning concept mentioned heavily in the sources called TOD, or transit-oriented development.
We hear this term TOD floating around a lot in these sources, but it sounds like very dense urban planning jargon to me.
It can be, yeah.
So if I'm a resident, how does this TOD concept actually change my day-to-day life regarding my commute, my environment, or just my neighborhood?
It fundamentally rewrites your daily geography. Transit-oriented development has 3 distinct goals that directly alter the lived experience of a city.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, it addresses the environmental crisis by radically reducing the carbon footprint. By housing citizens directly on the transit network, you fundamentally change how they move.
Right.
The STM's stated goal with this TOD strategy is to avoid 2.3 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually.
2.3 million tons.
Annually. Because if your apartment is just an elevator right away from the train platform, your personal carbon footprint plummets because your reliance on a personal vehicle basically vanishes.
That environmental impact makes total sense. But we also mentioned Montreal's housing crisis earlier.
We did.
How does building skyscrapers over subway stations actually help average people find a place to live, rather than just creating, luxury penthouses for the ultra-wealthy?
Well, that brings us to the second goal of TOD enforcing social diversity. The real estate projects being built under this strategy, like the ones overseen by Mobilis Immobilier, aren't just given a blank check to build whatever fetches the highest price.
Okay, that's good to hear.
They often include strict quotas for affordable or social housing built directly into the emphyteutic lease agreements.
Ah, so it's baked into the contract.
Exactly. The mandate is to ensure that these new vertical neighborhoods reflect the socioeconomic mix of the city itself. It provides direct relief to the housing crisis by mandating affordable units in highly desirable, transit-adjacent locations.
So it's not just about building housing. It's about forcing equitable housing.
Yes.
And I imagine the final piece of this TOD puzzle is about the neighborhoods themselves. Like what happens at the actual station area?
The final goal is complete neighborhood revitalization. The idea is to turn stations from simple transit waypoints into complete living environments.
Okay.
The sources mention major existing hubs like Barry-Quay-AM, as well as future stations on the Blue Line like Vertières and Anjou. The objective is to integrate local services, grocery stores, pharmacies, daycares, and public squares directly into the station's footprint.
So what does this all mean? When you synthesize this entire TOD concept, it is absolutely brilliant by design.
It really is.
Because historically, a train station was just a departure point.
Yeah.
You went there strictly to leave.
Right, you ran in and left?
Yeah, you rushed in, swiped your card, and got out as fast as possible.
Yeah.
But by moving housing, enforcing social diversity, and stacking essential services directly on top of the station itself becomes a destination.
Yeah.
If everything you need, your affordable apartment, your groceries, your daycare, and your commute is stacked vertically, it effectively kills the need for car ownership. You are designing a lifestyle where a car is entirely obsolete.
And observing the STM's strategy, Their goals of reducing 2.3 million tons of greenhouse gases, enforcing affordable housing quotas, and executing massive $25.8 billion infrastructure investments, it is clear they are fundamentally transforming their own identity.
Totally.
This raises an important question, though. They are no longer just a utilitarian service provider moving people from point A to point B.
Right.
They are stepping into the role of a primary architect of modern urbanism. They are actively trying to make the city dense, connected, and sustainable.
They aren't just transporting Montreal anymore. They are literally building it.
Exactly. By transforming their stations into these multi-use hubs, they are attempting to ensure their own financial survival while completely redefining the physical and social landscape of the city.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When you look at the entire journey we just took, the evolution is stunning.
It is.
The Montreal Metro started as a simple underground tunnel network, just a utilitarian way to get out of the freezing cold and bypass street-level traffic.
Right. Very basic.
And now it is becoming the literal backbone, the foundational root system of a new vertical urban densification strategy. They're turning empty air into $400 million, building 4,000 homes, and creating a blueprint for the future of city living.
It is a remarkable shift in how we utilize public infrastructure, but it also leaves us with a critical, slightly provocative thought to mull over as this trend accelerates.
Oh,
If transit agencies successfully execute this pivot, if they become major landlords and dominant urban developers through these air rights, how will that permanently change our relationship with public infrastructure?
that's a huge question.
Right. Think about the power dynamic of the future city. If the single entity that controls your morning commute also controls the 99-year lease on your apartment building and manages the retail space for your local grocery store downstairs,
Wow.
does that transit agency effectively become the new town square? And if a transit authority holds a near monopoly on both how you move and where you live, what does that mean for the future of democratic public spaces?
Man, that is a fascinating reality to consider the next time you swipe your transit card and wait on a platform.
Truly.
We started today by looking down at a subway grate, thinking about the dark tunnels below. But it turns out the real story and the real future of the city was hiding in the empty sky right above our heads. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope this gave you a new perspective on the cities we build, the transit we use, and the hidden economics shaping our daily lives. Keep looking up, keep asking questions, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.